So hello everyone, I'm Kevin. I'm CEO of Keyrock, based in Brussels. It's a real pleasure actually to be here today and to have this conference in Brussels. So thank you to the organizer for putting it together. We need to be honest, right? The crypto scene in Belgium has not been, as dynamic in the last few years as it might have been, elsewhere. And this is why it's great to see you all here today. So basically, when you look at the title of my presentation, before we get to the donuts, when you look at the title of my presentation, it says I'm not in this for 20% a year, right? So there are kind of three ways you could interpret this. The first one is, what the hell is he talking about? So if that's what you're thinking, then it's great that you're here. You're going to learn a lot about crypto in the next few days, and you've definitely made the right call. The second option is that you think that I'm super greedy, and then 20% a year is just not enough for me. I'm a real crypto bro, money never sleeps kind of guy, and I'm in this for more than that. So if you think that, you got it wrong, actually. That's not me. That's not what I meant. That's not how I look at the crypto market. The last way to understand it, which of course is the right way to understand it, is that there's a lot more to crypto and there's a lot more to blockchain than just making 20% return a year, supposedly risk-free. And that's what I want to be talking about today. Because of course, with the market conditions that we're seeing now, it's very important to go back to the fundamentals and to actually remind ourselves, why does this actually matter? What is it that we're actually looking to build in this industry? And to do that, I'm going to speak about donuts, of all things. The thing is that I look at the crypto industry as a donut. The reason for it is that the first thing that you see is the pink stuff, right? It's pink, it's shiny, it's flashy, it's super sweet. So the first thing that you see is the sugar coating. That's what catches the eye. But the point is that that doesn't matter. Same way as with the donut, what actually matters is the donut itself, is the fundamentals. This is why crypto is interesting. And so what I'm going to try to do in this presentation, in these market conditions, in which basically most of the sugar is gone, is to remind you a bit of the fundamentals. What is the donut that we're looking at with crypto? Why is it actually interesting to spend some time in this technology and to give it the credit of its long-term potential, despite what is happening on the market? So crypto is based on blockchain, right? So we're going to speak about blockchain technology. Blockchain, as you are most likely aware, is built on decentralization, right? And it concerns mainly the exchange of value. So what is amazing about blockchain when applying to the exchange of values is that it gives you options. You can either work centralized fashion, like you have on the left, or decentralized, as you have on the right. If you look at the traditional markets today, traditional finance, you basically don't have an option, right? You can only go centralized. With blockchain, you can do either or. So when I say that blockchain and digital assets will fundamentally change the way that we represent value and the way that we exchange value, does that mean that everything is going to be decentralized? I personally don't think so, right? What matters is the business value that it creates. But what is interesting with blockchain is that you can actually choose. So for some activities, you can go centralized. For some other, you can go decentralized. It gives you that options. The question is, when does decentralization make sense, right? Why does blockchain actually make sense? To make that decision, I think that you have personally two things to look at. Does it simplify your life? That's one. And does it actually empower you as a user? Can you do more with something that is decentralized than you would be able to do with something that is centralized? And to go through those two things, I'm going to look basically at 4 examples, right? 4 real-life examples where blockchain is already applied, where crypto is already kind of mainstream, that provide long-term value. On those 4 examples, and we could actually do a lot more than 4, but there's only 25 minutes to speak, so I had to stop at that. For those 4 examples, we're going to look what is the sugar coating that doesn't matter, what is the short-term high that is now gone that doesn't matter, what is the actual added value that we see for users, right? And so we're going to look at 4 things. So exchanges and crypto trading in general, be them centralized or decentralized. We're going to look at DeFi, so decentralized finance, and more specifically lending and borrowing, which is one of its main use cases. We're going to look at stablecoins, and we're going to look at NFTs, right? For all those 4 things, there's a lot of sugar that doesn't matter, and there are also very good use cases that actually have an impact, which is the ones that you should be focusing on in the long term. So starting with exchanges. What do you have in mind when you think about crypto trading, right? I think that most people have in mind first is basically this, it only goes up, you can buy a Lambo, you have trading competitions, Bitcoin is going to the moon, you have a lot of scam YouTube channels that tell you how to triple your money in 2 days. With a miraculous bot, you only need to send your money to an account that you know nothing about. All of this, of course, is sugar, right? is the part that is super flashy, that is super shiny, but actually doesn't matter at all. When we look at exchanges, when we look at digital asset exchanges and digital assets trading, the actual value that you look at is a tremendous simplification of the entire trading process. This is a simplification, actually, of all the counterparties and all the process that involves just trading equity. The thing is so complex that even the image is blurry. It's ridiculous, you know? And this is a simplification. So once you look at, you see 3 different layers: trading, clearing, settlement, custody, asset servicing. All of this just to do one thing. I give you cash, you give me a stock. That's it. This is how it's currently done in traditional finance. Of course, all those layers are there for a reason, right? They evolved over the years, over the decades of trading equity to mitigate risk and to allow the market to get bigger and bigger. And all those layers, all those intermediaries were actually needed because the assets are not fully digital. So you need a trusted counterparty to make sure that the asset is yours. You need that counterparty to make sure that you're sending it only once, that you're sending the cash only once. You need it to make sure that you send it to the right person, they actually arrive, and so on and so on and so on. So you have an infinite number of layers to mitigate some risks that, of course, make sense to have back in the days, but today, big part of those layers are actually completely redundant because of the technology that we have and partly because of blockchain. What you might think, though, is that the system actually functions currently, right? If you buy equity, well, you get your equity. So it kind of works. I mean, whether financial market actually work, I think is an entirely different debate, right? And almost a bit philosophical, but it actually functions. And it's true. Here in Western Europe, if you want to buy, a stock, you're going to be able to do it. But the problem is that you have tremendous limitations, right? I mean, this process is super slow. If it's slow, and if there are so many intermediaries, it means also that it's costly, right? On top of it, not so many people can actually take part, because here you see brokers, you see banks. Of course, in Western Europe, in the Western world, it's easy, but there's a very large population in the entire world that is completely unbanked. They don't have access to this. Impossible. On top of it, if you trade with so many counterparties, you basically trade according to their rules. You can buy one stock during working days, during working hours. What if I want to buy half a stock on a Saturday? Can't do that. It's not possible. And this is because you have layers upon layers of intermediaries that are basically not needed anymore. So when you look at digital assets, when you look at what exchanges today can do, you're looking at a picture that is much more simple. You simply have sellers and buyers that directly interact with one exchange. How you do the custody, now you have options. You can do it yourself, you can do it on exchange, you can do it with third party. So you end up with something that is much more simpler. So the question is, why does it matter, right? Why is this interesting? First, it's interesting for the parties involved. All the companies that are part of the capital markets infrastructure, there are tremendous cost savings to be had here. You have the clearing that is basically now done completely automatically. You have the settlement, same thing. The custody, you have different options. So actually, Keyrock, we published a story last year, a study with Roland Berger on the impact of tokenization on the post-trade value chain. You should definitely have a read. It makes for a thrilling bedside reading. It's great stuff. But the main conclusion, basically, is that for all the counterparties involved in the market, going towards tokenized assets, going towards digital assets, you have more than 20% cost reduction. And that's in an industry that is fully mature, right? So it's not just something that you can scoff at, it is a tremendous change. And that is just for the players in the market. Now what matters is that this has tremendous impact on the users themselves. And this is actually the most important. Because all of a sudden, you don't need to go through brokers, you don't need to go through a bank, you can directly access potential investment opportunities. You can do it 24/7, anywhere in the world, no matter the amount that you want to trade. You can do that very cheaply, very fastly, which you could not do before. So at the end of the day, when you look at exchanges, when you look at crypto trading, which everything that I've just described, is not about Lambos, It's not about a stupid trading competition. It's actually about taking hurdles down with the access to capital markets, and it's about having a greater financial empowerment and financial freedom for a larger portion of the world. This is what it's about. This is the donut. This is what it brings on the long term. If I look on the second example, it's going to be DeFi. I mean, I think you're going to see quite a pattern here. Every time you have a flashy slide, it's kind of the sugar. Every time you have something a bit more boring, it's actually what matters. You're going to see it come back and back. So when you look at DeFi, what have you heard about it? Of course, everybody heard about Anchor, right? You get 20% a year on stablecoins, risk-free, great stuff, right? That collapsed a few weeks ago. Maybe if you're a bit more into DeFi, you've heard about DGenBox. You know, it's already a bit more advanced in terms of, you know, DeFi craziness, but it's the same logic. You could get very highly leveraged yield farming, and the whole thing actually collapsed. If you're less about decentralized finance, for sure you've heard about hacks. You've heard about hacks, you've heard about scams, you've heard about how risky it is to interact with decentralized finance. And now all of this is true, right? It is 100% true. But the thing is that this is only the superficial part of it. This is not what actually matters about it. When you look at why DeFi is important, why DeFi is interesting on the long term and potentially tremendously transformational, it's basically something completely different. This is just looking at the main use case, right? DeFi lending and borrowing, right? So the lending and borrowing that you can do through decentralized protocols. In the last, you know, in a period of less than 2 years, the volumes that are being lended and borrowed have grown to tens of billions per month. It's a tremendous growth. A growth like this doesn't just happen because of, you know, some flashy yield farming opportunities. There has to be something fundamental about it, right? Now, what do you do in traditional finance when you have a bit of money set aside that you don't want to invest into a risky asset? You have 100 euros. You don't want to buy stocks. You don't want to place it anywhere. You just want it to work. What do? You put it on your savings account. That gives you 0. The bank is making money on it, of course, because they're lending it out to other counterparties, but you are making 0. Now, if you look at DeFi, you actually have something that is super simple and super accessible when you can directly put that money to work. You can get a return on whatever money you want, whatever amount, everywhere in the world, 24/7. That's a tremendous added value. Of course, there are tons of risk, right? You cannot downplay the risk that you have in interacting with DeFi. The user experience is not always easy. You're doing the custody of your assets yourselves. In most cases, that comes with some risk, right? You can lose it, you can misplace it. There are lots of risk and lots of steps to be taken to go towards maturity. But despite all those shortcomings, you here have a financial system that is completely decentralized, that is completely geographically decentralized. So in terms of governance, you have something that is everywhere in the world. You have something that is fully transparent. You can follow everything that happens in those smart contracts. You have full transparency. And you have something that is incredibly accessible, again, to everyone in the world. You don't get that type of growth in 2 years if you are not solving a fundamental problem. And it is the case of DeFi. There's still a lot of work to be done. And here I'm just looking at lending and borrowing, but the type of use case that you have is much broader than that. There's a lot of work to be done, but there is tremendous value already existing in the space, and that is the value that actually matters, right? If I go on my third example, stablecoins. Here, to be honest, it was a bit harder to come up with something flashy because there's nothing really flashy about stablecoins, right? You have 1 USDT is worth 1 USD. There you go. That's the use case, you know. Nothing amazing about it, no promises of crazy yields. To be fair, what was done on Anchor was yield on stablecoin, but that's not really linked to the stablecoin itself, more, you know, what the Anchor protocol was suggesting and doing. But so, what do you have in mind when you think about stablecoins? You actually have more negatives in mind. You have 2 main risks. The first one is, are they audited? Are they actually backed, right? If I give 1 USD to Tether, receive a USDT, is it actually backed, or is it just money that they are, you know, creating out of thin air? And this is why you have the big 4 logos. So are they audited? That's why they're there. Of course, it's a risk, right? The second that you have is the example, most likely in recent weeks, of UST. So the Terra USD. So it was an algorithmic stablecoin on the Terra blockchain that went to 0. So it was supposed to be worth $1. It's now worth $0. So very clearly, there's some risk involved, right? So those are the 2 things that you might have in mind. So the question is, why does it actually matter? You know, in light of those risks, in light of those collapses and events, why are stablecoins even authorized? You know, why is it still accessible? And then you end up with something super basic to explain. It's just very easy to transfer money. It's incredibly easy. If you want to send money from A to B with stablecoins, no matter the amount, no matter where A is in the world, no matter where B is in the world, you can do it. It's super cheap. It takes about 10 minutes. You send whatever amount, it doesn't matter. Again, you might be thinking about SEPA. It's like, yeah, I can do that from between ING and BNP, more or less the same thing. But there's more to the world than Western Europe. I don't know when's the last time that you tried to send money to the US. It takes 3 days. You try to send money to Brazil, to Colombia, to Mexico, to Thailand, to whatever other countries. It's an absolute nightmare. The reason for it is that you have you, then you have a bank, then you have a payment service provider, then you have another bank, then you have another person. Again, you have all those intermediaries. It makes it completely unnecessarily complicated. Here, you have a blockchain, B. Blockchain is always open, works 24/7. You can send your amount super easily. Keyrock, we're a market-making company, right? So we provide liquidity, and we trade on a very big number of different markets. We trade on more than 80 exchanges, 300 markets, 24/7 a day. So believe me, we are very often sending capital around. If we did not have stablecoins, our business would be tremendously more difficult. That is a certainty. So the value that is created by stablecoin is extremely obvious. It just makes it easy to transfer capital. It seems basic, but it's not something that everybody has. Now, there is an interesting concept about stablecoin that I'm sure is going to be discussed in the next few days as well, is central bank digital currencies. So currently, stablecoins, if they are centralized, they are issued by private entities, right? And there are projects by different central banks to do the same thing, to create a fully digital euro that will be backed by the European Central Bank, and a fully digital dollar that will be backed by the Fed, and so on and so forth. So the question there is, if that happens, why would we keep using privately owned stablecoins, right? Because you keep the same added value of being super easy to transfer, but you have an added counterparty risk by using the privately issued one, right? So I do think that actually that's a question that I don't have an answer to, and I actually look forward to seeing how it actually translates. When you have a stable euro, when you have a fully digital dollar, how is it going to look for Tether, for USDC, and so on and so forth? I think it's a very interesting question, because both cases are centralized in the way that they are backed, and they provide the same advantages. So it would be interesting to see. But then you also have fully decentralized stablecoins, right? And there, what is the added value? I mean, you have a bit of a bigger risk on the backing, potentially, depending on the system itself, but you have the option of going decentralized. I personally believe that having the options to send capital around without going potentially through centralized third parties that you might actually trust or not, I think it's a valuable option to have. And just for that, both centralized and decentralized stablecoin, I believe, have a tremendous future ahead, right? So that brings us to 3 out of 4. We have one more to go, which was a lot easier to find some flashy things for. It's NFTs. So actually, with NFTs, it was a lot tougher to find not flashy things, right? Because there's a lot of sugar when it comes to NFTs. Everything that you might have seen around NFTs in the last few months, in the last year, has been absolutely crazy. So, of course, for the artists that participate in it, the different sales that were made, the airdrops that were made, an artist like Pac selling his first collection for 80 million in a few minutes. You see a CryptoPunk, so we're going to see one just after that, just a small picture selling for 24 million for a profile picture. The guys that created the Bored Apes, that did a land sales in their metaverse in the last few weeks, and they sold the whole thing for 320 million in a few hours. So you have a lot of sugar. There's a lot of craziness in NFT. The question is, why does it actually matter, right? Why is it worth looking past people spending tens of millions on Twitter profile picture? Basically, what you have with NFT is that is the first time that you mix uniqueness and digital. It's the first time that this happens. And what you have in the middle, NFTs, that's a CryptoPunk that was sold for 24 million, by the way. It's not the real one. It's just a right-click, copy, paste, unfortunately. But still, So it's not the original. But so NFT is the first time that you mix uniqueness and digital. So if you are a creator of content that you want to keep unique, you can now do it, of course, like physically. You paint your painter, you have it there. There's only one of it, but you can also do it digitally. And why is it interesting? Is because all of a sudden, all the advantages of the digital world is now also potentially applied to unique assets. So the ease with which you can communicate about it, the ease with which you can sell them, exchange them, transfer them, communicate, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, it's been the reason why digital has taken off so much with all other content and all other information is because of all the added value that it had, right? You now have the same thing with unique assets. So as a creator, you have access to all this added value without taking the main risk of digitizing your content, of it just being stolen, Right now, without NFTs, you have a picture, it's right-click, copy, paste, there's another copy. You don't know which one is the original anymore. Here with NFTs, yes, it's the exact same one, but I don't have the original. I don't have the 24 millions. You would think that it's exactly the same. Why does it matter? But that point also holds for physical art. I mean, you have absolutely perfect copies of the Mona Lisa. It doesn't have the same value as the original, even though it's exactly the same. Why? Because it's not the original. And this logic that you can now apply, of course, to physical assets, but also to digital assets, is absolutely groundbreaking. Not only do you end up in a system where you are empowering creators, right? Because if you create music, you create, visual art, you cannot diffuse it yourself to the entire world on a digital format without taking the risk of losing that uniqueness. It's groundbreaking for art, of course. This is the first use case that you think about. But what else is there in terms of content, in terms of assets that we create, that we have digitally, and that we want to keep unique? This is something that goes a lot beyond art. I mean, think about your data. Well, as a creator of digital data, you want to be able to keep that unique. You want to be able to keep control over it, which you currently don't have at all. If you think about your digital identity, if you think about the credit history, if you think about a proof of employment, a proof of property, if you think about tickets to this conference, accesses of all kinds, all of these are things that are fully digital, but that you want to keep unique. And the use cases here are absolutely limitless. So when you think about NFTs, of course, there's a very flashy, stupid, sometimes profile pictures that go for crazy prices, right? You have a bit of everything. But what really matters is not that. What really matters is for the first time you have a technology that allows you to have something that is both fully digital and unique. And the groundbreaking here is that the use cases are absolutely infinite. So that's 4 out of 4. So we get to my conclusion. Back to the donut. I mean, as we've seen on those 4 examples, so exchanges and crypto trading, DeFi, lending and borrowing, stablecoins, NFTs. In all cases, there was a lot of flashy, shiny things that didn't matter, right? What is amazing about this market today is that all the sugar is gone. No more short promises, more or less. You only see the real thing, which means that you can actually pick what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what actually has value on the long term, and what doesn't. And that is basically the big promise of blockchain and how I believe that it's something that would be profoundly transformational. So thank you very much for your attention and have a super nice afternoon. Thank you.